Hello world of YouTube, and welcome to my April listening log update for the year of 2018. Life update before I get into everything. This month was pretty crazy. Work, my day job got a little more intense because I'm doing certain things in the company that were beneficial to me, but also took away from some of my time to delve into records. So I didn't get to many records this month as I would have liked. But I still got 8 under my belt, which is a pretty good round average number that I've seemed to have reached so far. I'm hoping throughout the summer, since my workload's going to pull back a little bit, I'll be able to invest more time into listening to music. Because I do feel like my consistency isn't how it's been in the years past since I've done the listening log. But we'll see. I did get a lot of the requests that I had under my belt out of the way, but there are some that I still haven't gotten to, and also I kind of substituted other suggestions people had for their requests temporarily, so hopefully you enjoyed this round. Without further ado, let's get into it. And the first album I checked out this month was from the British band Shopping, their newest album, The Official Body. Now I checked this out purely off of Crash's recommendation. Crash Thompson, in one of his reviews, he was like, this album's really good, listen to this instead of something else. And I was pleasantly surprised. I had never heard of these guys. I didn't know what to expect other than they were post-punk, and they were definitely an older sounding post-punk band, even though they're a newer band. I got a lot of very early Talking Heads sounds and some of their instrumentation and how the production sounded, with a little more of a surf rock twist. Almost akin to some Violent Femme shit! And with that, and their two vocalists that they had's delivery and chemistry, they almost kind of reminded me of the B-52s in that regard as well. They were kind of like this weird hybrid of like a less new wavy B-52s, and I was perfectly okay with that. I mean, I think that the band isn't too flashy, it's all very subtle, but it's still got a really tight set of grooves and some sharp crafted lyricism. While I did enjoy this thing, and I've enjoyed revisiting this thing and kind of digesting it, it hasn't been something that I've wanted to invest more of my time into as far as like the rest of their catalog. I was impressed by this. I think these guys have a good sound. I like the way they write their songs, but there wasn't anything to really make me listen to their older stuff. Maybe that'll change as the year goes on and as these guys kind of sit in my overall collection of tunes that I'll listen to, but I did enjoy this as a first taste of this band. I think that it's refreshing for something out of the indie scene to not just be overly influenced by new wave and synth music. I like that these guys are going to take it back a little more. It's a sound that I'm glad to not see have died out in this facet, and I think that if you like early post-punk, you'll enjoy this thing. I give it like an 8 out of 10. This is an album that was requested by my buddy Tyler, who was the one who requested Lil Boat 2. Only difference being, he and I both love Flatbush Zombies, and this is an album I was going to want to talk about anyway. And boy, is it pretty good. It's about as good as 3001, but my complaints with it are a little different than the ones that were on with 3001. I think that they're definitely a lot more ambitious this time around. This is a little more of a sprawling project. They have a lot more ideas in the pot. But I do think it's a little more quantity over quality this time around. This thing is like 75 minutes long, and it feels a little taxing, especially near the tail end of the record. I think this thing starts off really well. I think Hello and M. Bison and Headstone, which is the first single on the album, are all great representations of what I love about Flatbush Zombies. And there are even some expansions on that with Crown featuring Portugal the Man, which might be my favorite song on the album, and it's become a favorite of mine in the band's catalog. But I think that there are more cuts on here that do very little for me as far as like presenting a sound or a song style that wowed me. One of the things I really liked about 3001 is that it's consistent, even if it's a little dull at times. This has a lot of flashes, But there are tracks like Courtney, The Goddess, Trapped, You Are My Sunshine, all don't really do a whole lot for me in the tail end. Other tracks like Big Trimp, Proxies, and Misunderstood all have really great instrumentals, and they have a lot of that Flatbush style, but I feel like they don't have as much of a lasting effect as I thought they would upon first listen. I do think one of the more interesting aspects of this album are some of the features and how they're utilized. Joey Badass on Vacation almost doesn't sound like himself, and Denzel Curry on The Closer of the Glory, which is a really good closer and a great song, he sounds unidentifiable. Unless you told me that was Denzel Curry, I would not have believed you, because even on Denzel's mellower cuts, he doesn't sound this way. His vocal tonal quality is just completely different than his normal stuff. Not in a bad way, but it was a little weird. It was a little jarring. But when these guys pull their shit together and they write a fucking stunner of a tune, it impresses me. And I think that it's good that these guys still are pushing their sound forward. They're kind of feeling themselves around as far as what they want to sound like as a rap group. But I do think this could have been better. I feel like if they tightened up the track listing a little bit, worked on some of their feature work on some of their song structures and ideas, they could have made a better progression of themselves as a group. But again, it's still really good. When it's good, it's fucking great. And that's why I give this thing like a 7 out of 10. It's not what I wanted, but it's still better than it could have ended up. Now this album was actually also suggested on my Rate Your Music page by the user GManYoki, and it is the latest Caroline Rose album, Loner. My introduction to this artist as well. I never checked her previous two efforts. She's a New York singer, songwriter, indie pop maker, and I found this thing incredibly engaging and super charming. There's a lot of wit and sarcasm in a lot of her lyrics. There's a very dour sound to her soundscape, and her voice rings really well on the instrumental she decides to craft. This thing almost felt like the soundscape of some of the cuts off of Plastic Beach by the Gorillaz, with a little more of a Chibo motto if they were influenced by synth pop instead of lounge music twist. Some of the cuts on here are some of the best songs I've heard all year, especially Jeannie Becomes a Mom. That chord progression and the chorus just hit me so well. They hit my face in a way that I did not expect. Other cuts like Cry, Bikini, really well crafted. Again, sharp, smart song. I just enjoy the tone that Caroline Rose decides to present to her music that is bookended with a hell of an opener and a hell of a closer. This thing is charming in all the right ways, it's poppy in all the right ways, and it's just a great little package. This was my album of the month until I invested in something later on in the month, and this definitely gets one of my higher praises of the year for sure. I do give it like an 8 out of 10, like I did Shopping, but this is on the higher echelon of that. I can see myself revisiting this heavily throughout the rest of the year. It has wowed me, it's floored me in a lot of really good ways.
I got the earth and the blunt. I get the skirt when I want. I get the skirt when I want. Due to the
Whoo boy! J. Cole's newest record was the next one I decided to tackle, and I have a mixed history with J. Cole. I really like J. Cole's ideas. I think he can craft himself a damn fine verse if he wants, but I do think while he is smart, he does not write a compelling project more often than not. I like this guy's voice. I think he's a good voice in hip-hop. I think he had a lot of potential, and I think a lot of people want more from J. Cole than they seem to get, at least in the blogosphere. He has a lot of fans, and I say this as a guy who considers himself a fan of J. Cole. I was definitely underwhelmed by this thing, but I've also been underwhelmed from his last couple of projects. I think the last project of his I holistically loved, was 2014 Forest Hills Drive. And I was upset that I didn't like this thing because I like the idea he's pitching. I love the cover art. I like a lot of the instrumentals on here, but I feel like this thing suffers from philosophical, lyrical inconsistencies and some hypocrisies in the mix. And not everyone gets hung up on that, but for a guy like J. Cole, who's built himself on being this philosophical, conscious rapper, to not have a holistically represented philosophy that kind of backpedals is a little underwhelming. Like, to say the first couple of tracks, where he's throwing on some of these trap-styled instrumentals, and then just to turn around by the end of the record and say that trap isn't what I'm going for, it's a little much. Also, the fact that you wrote an album about, or you pitched this album as something about kids overdosing and kids on drugs and making that the focal point, and not following through with that throughout the entire record, instead writing cuts where you're talking about money, or you're talking about why you don't have features on your records normally. It just, there's a lot of detractors that pull away from what could be a great concept album or a great idea, because I think it's important. You know, Kendrick Lamar wrote ADHD back in 2011, and drug culture is still a big thing. Kids are still on them drugs. Drugs are still huge in this country. And while I don't think Kendrick's ADHD detracts from his concepts on Section 80, that wasn't his pitch. J. Cole's pitch on this was writing an album about consciousness, not even necessarily just kids overdosing, kids on drugs, but being a more conscious effort with that in mind. And to pitch that and not have it be fully followed through, it's a little underwhelming. I do think this thing has some good cuts on it. I do think this thing does have good tracks on it. The title track itself, I like the instrumental. I love Once an Addict. Friends is fucking great. Even if some of the hooks on here, like Friends, is a little much. ATM's a good cut. It's got a really good amped flow to it, but I almost compare this thing to a Logic project than I would a J. Cole project, and I like J. Cole much more than Logic. I think that it's got that same Cole quality is met, but it's just not maintained, and that's the problem, I feel like, with this record. I want Cole to succeed. I want Cole to keep crafting better records. This one just wasn't one of them. I give this thing like a 5 out of 10. I really wanted to like this thing, and I apologize to those that don't like my opinion. But that's why it's an opinion. Next one wasn't necessarily a request, but the next couple of ones were ones that people wanted me to get to, and they were already on my radar, so I just made sure to make an effort to get to them since they're also newer albums. But the newest Tesseract album, Sonder, dropped, and I like Tesseract's first album. I like one of their EPs. They dropped some cuts that they've dropped since one, but I don't think they've met anything that comes to the standard of one. And this album, it's kind of more the same with Tesseract. It meets that kind of standard of decentness. I've also kind of quickly become subjected to Gent fatigue. Whenever Gent popped on the scene, I was all about it. I was gobbling it up. And now I kind of feel like there's a lot of albums like this one especially that just kind of aim for that mid-tier and are okay with that. I think this album has some decent moments, but actually this album is a little more subdued than I thought it was going to be. I do like tracks like Orbital. I don't think Tesseract is bad when they get long-winded, but they haven't written any good longer-winded songs since one. I feel like they kind of bogged their songs down with just these meaningless, just syncopated passages that have nothing to do with anything and just kind of feel like filler. This album feels like it does still have a lot of that filler. King, what's like the first really big song, starts off okay, but then just kind of elongates itself a little too much. I feel like these guys have the ability to write decent riffs and songs, but I feel like especially on this album they're too caught up in those Gent idiosyncrasies that make a lot of those typical Gent bands bogged down and lesser as a result. This album sounds like it's still caught up in that trend and that wave that's not even really that prolific anymore, but doesn't do anything for me 8 years after Gent really started to pop on the scene. I think it's got some good vocal lines. I think there's some decent songwriting here, but all in all, it's a little underwhelming. It's a little underwhelming. I have this thing sitting in kind of a mid score. It's about a 5. You know, I think it's got good ideas, but it's very samey, very atonal, and it's all about those tropes that water down a lot of the better Gent albums that have come out in recent years, now that the trend has kind of died down a bit. So Perfect Circle's newest record, their comeback album, is out now, and I'll be honest, I've always kind of viewed A Perfect Circle as the Wings to Tool's Beatles. So I like A Perfect Circle, but I don't necessarily love A Perfect Circle. I do admire this album's attempt at changing what a Perfect Circle record sounds like. I like these very less aggro alt metal sounds, because I feel like one of my bigger issues with especially early A Perfect Circle is that it sounded a little too much like Diet Tool. And this doesn't sound like that. This just sounds like a band making an album that happens to be fronted by Maynard James Keenan. I don't think that all of the ideas work, but I do think some of them work. I really love So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. The song is kind of a tribute to all of these dead celebrities that people consider idols in recent years. I love that. I think it's a very earnest, heartfelt track. I think DLB is a really well-written song. Hourglass represent that kind of APC sound that people like, and I like that it's still there, just in smaller increments. I don't think every song in here works. Talk Talk is a little cringy, kind of toes those lines. Some of the lines about fear of technology and everything just kind of sound a little tired, a little reminiscent of a little too much of reminiscent of a mid-2000s, early 2000s fears that were kind of prominent in lyrics, but to a lesser degree. Some of the use of the more twinkly atmosphere doesn't suit every song well. I like the more prominence of ivory keys. I think piano presence on here is a nice change of pace, but I feel like it almost whimpers Maynard's voice, because his voice was almost made to be backed by these cock rock guitars, which is a hindrance, I feel like, sometimes, because it bogs down what are sometimes some well-written cuts, but more often than not, I feel like it just presents this dichotomy that I don't feel like always works. It does a lot of the time, at least for me. This is a personal thing. But I don't feel like it's fully realized, or I don't feel like it doesn't come together as well as they were wanting it to, in my opinion. I think when the lyrics are sharp, they're very well crafted. The Contrarian is another really well written song that just has that wit that I really look for from Maynard James Keenan. It's smart. It's not cringy. It's not what a lot of 2000s metal bands were doing. It shows that he's still a really good writer. So, yeah, I mean, I do like this thing, and I think that it's really interesting that APC decided to just reinvent their own wheel for their comeback. But it's still an APC album. They've never been my go-to band. But I did enjoy this more than I thought I would. I give it like a 7 out of 10. It's better than I thought it would be, but it's also still just APC. It's time for my album of the month. The Sleep Return, The Sciences. Sleep, legendary stoner band, fucking great. This thing starts off making you think it's gonna be just this old band doing new tricks with this loud, noisy, just almost cacophonous sound that immediately breaks into what you would expect. These very stonerific, sludgy, very dirty, gritty guitar riffs with vocals that just suit them so perfectly. These guys are back like they've never missed a beat, and it's fucking amazing. It is just so many well-crafted cuts. These guys show that they still have a knack for writing just doomy, bleak epics. A lot of really, you know, druggy sounding lyrics paired with so many monolithic images that fit the spacey album cover that this album has. I think they work. These guys know how to pen them. They know how to write them. These guys are still as tight as ever, and I'm glad they're back. I'm glad they made this record. I've been wanting more records like this year that I can just kind of cherish and indulge and just digest and continue to do so. This is how you write longer albums. This is how you pace yourself musically. You know, how you make songs work on a longer scale. And it's a good standard for bands to try to achieve. I give this thing like a 9 out of 10. It's so good. It's so weed. And that fucking bong rip, it's the best thing ever. It's so fucking great. It got an audible cackle out of me because it was so out of nowhere. And the last album I checked out this month was another request by my buddy Josh. He wanted me to check out the newest Cardi B album, or her debut album, Invasion of Privacy, and I have mixed feelings about Cardi B as a performer, as a rapper. While on one hand, Bodak Yellow exists, I've never been the biggest fan of that song. It's on here. She thoroughly impressed me with her finesse verse. I didn't expect that kind of panache to come from Cardi B, and so it gave me kind of hope that that would be on this album, and it did. I mean, this thing is a lot better than I thought it would be. Is it phenomenal? No, but I do think it is worth investing your time into. It is it's a more consistent project than I thought it was going to be, and it's a little more ambitious than I thought it was going to be. I'm not to say that it's super profound. None of these instrumentals are really anything that I wouldn't expect Cardi B to spit on, given her kind of range goes from Bodak Yellow's trap beat to New Jack Swing, but there was a lot less trap on here than I thought would be, given that Bodak Yellow's on here. It's still here. There's a cut with Migos. I don't really care for it all that much. I don't really care about the track with 21 Savage, but she presents herself as a well-rounded personality in hip-hop, which I enjoyed. I think Get Up 10 reminds me of these kind of 90s hip-hop cuts that I was wanting to hear more of. It's just not as much 91 and more 95, which is fine. 95 was a great year for hip-hop. Bodak Yellow, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the song, I do like some of the lyrics in it. I like some of the ideas she's going for. The instrumental on Moneybag is fucking gold. That icy synth, it just works for her. It reminded me of the track Danny Brown did with Rusty Attack. Some of the poppier songs like Ring and I Do work, even if it's not necessarily what I expected from her, only because she's presented herself as this cold, fun MC. I didn't expect these more earnest personal cuts, but I think they work. Other cuts like Best Life and I Like It, great instrumental work, great feature work. I like that Cardi B isn't just playing the standard pop rap cards. She's pulling dudes like Chance in. She's working with more of her roots, or her culture. She wants to incorporate herself into her album. She doesn't just want to be a product, and I can respect that. I, again, was kind of thoroughly surprised with this thing. I didn't think I'd like it as much as I do. Still not amazing, but really, really good. I do give this thing like a 6 out of 10. It wowed me in a lot of ways I wasn't expecting it. I'm sure a lot of you didn't expect me to give it this rating either, given that I teased that I was going to be talking about this on Twitter yesterday. But yeah, 6 out of 10. And that's going to close out April. I'm hoping throughout the next month to catch up on other releases that I missed, catch up on my requests that people want me to do, and still listen to new albums that are dropping, because there's some stuff in May that I'm hyped for. But either way, I have been ViralRak. You guys have continued license situations, and I'll see you another day.